most about the diagnosis of a breast cancer as it or maybe the masses of the breast. Now, as a differential diagnosis, the important conditions from the clinical point of view are many of the conditions in the breast, they are presented as a lumps, and a differential diagnosis for the breast cancer would be the benign tumors as well as the other lumps have to be differentiated, and most of the times this differentiation has to be made by either a clinical examination or at times it could be investigations which are absolutely necessary. The role of imaging investigations comes in very important in differentiating these benign tumors from the malignant. Among those common benign masses in the breast, the most important conditions, again there could be a huge list of the conditions as such, but I will be just referring to the common conditions which often produce a confusion with the breast cancer from the clinical point of view are hydroadenoma, papilloma, pyloidostomia or lactating adenoma, or the other way also is called as galactosine. In addition to these benign tumors, there could be other conditions which can present with a similar presentation. The breast axis and accessory mammary gland. Accessory mammary gland is an abnormal situation. Now, to differentiate between this, fibroadenoma, which is a very common condition, most of the times the fibroadenoma is seen in younger age, and the pre-menarche age group is or maybe just post-menarche, not pre-menarche. Post-menarche age group are the very common group where the patients would be presenting with fibroadenoma. It's again a benign tumor. Exact causes are not known as in any other tumor pathology, and it is presented as a simple painless lump in the breast, and it's because it's having a capsule and it's not adherent to the surrounding tissue. It's usually felt as a freely moving lump. When you palpate, the movement of the lump would be quite free, and because of that it's also often named as a breast mouse, considering like something like a mouse running below your hand. That kind of an appearance. It's not that it's really runs, but it's freely movable and it's not adherent. Typically when you excise, the fibroadenoma is seen as a dense whitish matter in the clear-cut border, and ultrasonography could be quite useful in making the diagnosis of the fibroadenoma. Fibroadenoma would have a very thick capsule and a uniform consistency. There could be some calcifications within. Those calcifications may be seen in the ultrasonography either as a microcalcification or the macrocalcification. A microcalcification, that's a smaller amount of calcification, is always risky conditions, and macrocalcifications are usually common in case of fibroadenoma. Fibroadenoma ultrasonography findings also can vary significantly, and some of the examples, either it could be like capsulated, well capsulated, which is a very characteristic feature, or at times it could be having a different shape. When the shapes are altered, the suspicion for the malignancy will be higher. And if a fibroadenoma is handled by biopsy earlier, the shape gets again altered. When the shape gets altered, the suspicion of malignancy will be higher. Now, because of this, every case of fibroadenoma would require a surgical intervention. A surgical intervention like excision and biopsy would be required. So, from the clinical point of view, to say whether a fibroadenoma really requires biopsy or not, it's often a risky proposition. Many times it becomes risky, like if you take a child asset. But in general, the difference between a fibroadenoma and a breast cancer are when you do the ultrasonography, the shape, that difference can be better made out. Clinically, of course, a younger age and a breast mouse-like feeling, like moving sort of mass, is generally suggestive of a fibroadenoma, benign tumor. But ultrasonography can do more this dependable opinion. And the typical differences between a fibroadenoma and a breast cancer is, in the breast cancer ultrasonography, the shape would be mostly irregular. At times it could be round or oval, whereas fibroadenoma is always oval or round, and sometimes it could be lobulated, as you see over here. And most of the times that lobulated fibroadenoma is a consequence of previous handling. The margins of fibroadenoma are fully circumscribed and well delineated. There will be a layer of dense tissue around, and it can easily differentiated. Whereas typically breast cancer would have a indistinct and angular one. That's what we have discussed in the previous sessions, like the Bayard's classification and the pattern like. Orientation of fibroadenoma is usually more wider than the height. The height would be lesser, width would be more in case of the fibroadenoma. Whereas in case of malignancy cancers, usually the height would be more and width would be comparatively lesser. And the echogenic property, most of the times both the tumors, breast cancer as well as the fibroadenoma, they may present as a hypoechoic lesion, and the posterior surface of the fibroadenoma would not have a enhancement. There will be no shadowing in the posterior surface. There will be no penetration. Very rarely there could be some. But in case of the breast cancer, the posterior surface of the mass would have some extension, getting the suggestion of an evidence to the surrounding area. The fibroadenoma may show a larger calcification, as you see, large spots of calcification may be seen in fibroadenoma. Whereas in case of breast cancer, it is only microcalcification within or outside the tumor. Fibroadenoma doesn't require a treatment as such, but clinically we will have to go for a lumpectomy or removal of the mass to rule out the malignancy, because both clinical as well as ultrasonography findings have some scope for error, and to avoid that possibility of error, it is required. Another of the condition is fibroadenosis, which also can present as a lump in the breast, and most of the times the fibroadenosis is presented in the sexually active life later, it may not be just post-menarche, in the later part of life, usually after 20s, that it occurs, and it's always related to some hormonal changes in the body, and characteristically it's presented as a wider mass with multiple lobulated appearances, and usually it would be painful during the cycles. There will be more congestion in the breast, and there will be pain during the cycles, or just prior to the cycles the patient will experience some pain, and fibroadenomatosis most of the times will be bilateral, both the breast will be involved. And when a palpate, that also can be made out as a multiple lobulated masses which is very close to the skin, or at times even it could be partially adherent to the skin. Ultrasonography can make out that amorphous character, that having no lobules or no borders and widespread lesions closer to the skin, that would be the appearance of the fibroadenosis. And the fibroadenosis also doesn't require any intervention. Again, from the same point of view, because there is a suspicion of possibility of a neoplasm, you may require a biopsy. Otherwise, fibroadenosis doesn't require a surgical intervention. Most of the times it is treated with the hormonal suppressant treatments. Now, another of the condition which mimics the tumor pathology is papilloma. Papilloma is a benign tumor again, usually presented at the surface of the nipple, very close to the nipple, and because there will be some raw surface seen on the nipple, it may be often feeling like, it may look like a erosion of the nipple, because erosion of the nipple is a very common sign of the malignancy. Again, it produces some confusion, and even there could be some bleeding. A papilloma can bleed because the tissue may be fragile. Again, the ultrasonography or MRI scans, MRI scans can be much better, or ultrasonography or even mammography. MRI scan gives you a better idea of these papilloma conditions, where the area involved would be very close to the nipple only. Mammography also can be quite useful. Ultrasonography also shows the same features like when the duct is involved. A papilloma excised would be seen as having a narrow opening, a thick opening at the duct and connected to the duct system. The duct system of the breast can be easily seen, and again here also you may require a biopsy. Surgical excision may be required to rule out the malignancies. Filamentous tumor is another rare condition where the patient would have a hard mass in the breast and the size can grow very rapidly, and often it produces a confusion. That Phyllodes word comes in from a type of a plant, Acacia cana, where the leaf would be developing over a leaf. The secondary type of the leaves would be developing over the primary type of the leaf, and because of that similarity of the surface where the mass would be having a irregular surface is called as Phyllodes tumor. Characteristically it's very hard and relatively fast moving, and because the surface is irregular, often it felt like it's an alien lesion. It would be painless again, it would be painless, and ultrasonography, mammography or ultrasonography or even MRI scan can confirm this condition. The surgical treatment of excision in Phyllodes tumor would be required because of the gross appearance, but once it is confirmed that it is a Phyllodes tumor, there is no need of any follow-up treatment because it is not malignant. Rarely Phyllodes tumors can recur locally, but again it may require a repeated excision. Now, another of the conditions which often can mimic the conditions of tumors or which have a differential diagnosis from the diagnosis of the tumor will be galactosile or lactating adenoma. Galactosile is due to retention of the milk in any of the breast gland or the duct system after a period of lactation, either during the lactation or after the lactation. Most of the times the patient of lactating adenoma would be presenting during the end period of lactation, last a few months of, after lactation, patient may have that feeling of pain. Often it also can be painful, may result in an abscess in due course of time, or it may be even occurring much later, that initially the size may not be big, but gradually it may increase in size, presenting with a relatively cystic mass in the breast acid. But unlike that of fibrilloma, it will not be freely movable. It is non-tender, a soft mass will be seen, and if you insert a needle, you can feel or you can see that milk secretion coming through from the needle, aspiration, and aspirate the milk will be seen in such condition. Signs of inflammation either may or may not be present in such conditions. If there is a signs of inflammation, of course the diagnosis is easier, but if there is no sign of inflammation, then the diagnosis becomes again confusing. Ultrasonography or mammography or MRI scan can show the presence of that fluid, typical fluid, milky consistency, that calcium containing fluid of milky consistency can be made out with the investigations, and again this doesn't require a follow-up like a malignancy, but again it requires a surgical excision to rule out other conditions. Another of the conditions is breast abscess, which can present as a lump. It is quite common in the lactating period or post-lactation period. Usually breast abscess presents in a typical clinical sign of inflammation, and the patient would have temperature, local pain, and so on. So that the differential diagnosis doesn't become important. But when such patients are treated with antibiotics and then later the clinical symptoms subside, the fluid which may not be drained completely, the pus which is not drained completely, may remain in the breast tissue with a hardening fibrous tissue around, and that becomes an antibioma. An antibioma would be present as a painless cystic swelling. Often you have a confusion with the galactosile or even with the tumor because the surface would be highly irregular. It looks like the area is adherent. Ultrasonography can make out that antibioma easily, the debris tissue in the middle without any calcification, and having that thicker outer layer with that signs of inflammation seen would be the characteristic feature of a breast abscess. Antibioma also requires a treatment of different sort, like excision would be required, but it's not mandatory that it has to be excised. Important would be it has to be ruled out, it has to be differentiated from the malignancy as such. Then another of the condition which may present with a mass in the breast area or in the surrounding area of the breast, either axilla or elsewhere, is either ectopic breast or accessory breast gland. The ectopic breast gland tissue would be having a mass projected anywhere in the body. Most of the glands on the milk line is from the axilla to the sternal area. That's the area where the ectopic breast tissues are often seen, or at times it could be even away from that area. Most of the times it is in the axilla. A swelling in the axilla which often can reach a confusion with other axillary swellings. Characteristically, accessory breast glands would have a soft consistency and painless. The only is the cosmetic issue. Rarely, a accessory breast gland also may have a nipple-like structure. A primitive nipple-like structure, if it is present, that clinically confirms the condition. But at times there could be no nipple as such, and in such conditions it has to be examined, and the ultrasonography can confirm the accessory breast gland tissue. The glandular structure of the tissue can be easily made out by the ultrasonography, and accessory breast glands do not require any specific treatment as from the pathology point of view. The only issue would be cosmetic issue, and from the cosmetic point of view it may require a surgical treatment. A accessory breast gland or ectopic breast gland even can be seen with multiple nipple appearances, nipple-like appearances, which again have some significance from the cosmetic point of view. These are certain of the important differential diagnosis of the tumor pathology. Now, as far as the malignancy of the breast is concerned, certain of the important facts which have to be known are: the infiltrating rectal carcinoma is the most common diagnosed breast tumor and has a tendency to metastasize the lymphatics, and it accounts for 75 to 85% of the breast cancers. Now, we have discussed about all that, what is infiltrating rectal carcinoma, etc., and how to make out that from the clinical as well as investigation point of view. Over the past 25 years, the incidence of lobular carcinoma in situ has doubled to 3.19% per 1 lakh persons per year, and the peak incidence is about aged above 50 years. Now, there is a tendency for local lobular carcinoma in situ being increased tendency, and infiltrating lobular carcinoma is for fewer than 15% of the invasive breast cancers. Medullary carcinoma accounts for about 5% of the cases and generally occurs in younger women. Listeners, for colloid carcinoma, we have discussed all these, what we mean by this medullary mesenchymal carcinoma, etc., in the previous session. So now certain of these facts. Mesenchymal carcinoma is seen in fewer than 5% of the invasive breast cancer. Tubular carcinoma of the breast accounts for only 2% of all breast cancers. Papillary carcinoma is usually seen in women older than 60 years and accounts for approximately 1 to 2% of the all breast cancers. Metaplastic breast cancer accounts for fewer than 1% of the breast cancer cases, tends to occur in older men. Now, purpose of referring to these statistical incidences is that when you see a patient of suspected tumor, these statistics would help you to give a weightage for the diagnosis based upon the clinical findings, investigation findings, and in the statistical incidence support also would be required to make a final diagnosis. When you make a final diagnosis, these are important. Now, as far as the classification of the confirmed tumor conditions, and another newer development, now this is a recent development, recent in the sense some past 25 years, this has developed. Earlier it was not there. The profiling, genome profiling of a tumor has become, once you have confirmed that it is a cancer of the breast, genome profiling has become almost a norm now, and the subtypes of different subtypes of the genome profiling are done now. Now, as far as the current uses, now I am limiting to currently used popular forms of the genome profiling of breast cancer. The main types, of course, if you go into the literature and evolve the types of the subtypes, there are a huge number of subtypes coming up. But I am just limiting myself only to those conditions which are now being used in the current clinical practice from the treatment point of view and planning for the treatment point of view. From that point of view, very important are estrogen receptor absence or presence. So, ER positive or ER negative, or progesterone receptor positive or negative, that's a progesterone receptor ER positive or negative, and then human epidermal growth factor receptor 2 HER2 HER2 again positive or negative. This is how the genome profiling is done. So now in the present situation, whenever you have a breast cancer condition, once you have seen for the histopathology, once the tissue is confirmed that it is a malignant, the profiling, genomic profiling to see whether these receptors are present but or not is necessary to plan the treatment. And these are classified as estrogen receptor positive or negative, progesterone receptor positive or negative, and human epidermal growth receptor positive negative. These are very commonly done investigation. Just very recently, since last around 3 to 4 years, another of the subtype is now being used in India also among the oncologists of the oncologists of our surrounding area. They are now using another subtype, that is cell proliferation regulator protein Ki67 positive or negative also. The subtypes of these again are categories further as luminal ER positive or HER2 negative, PR positive or low Ki67 or low proliferation tumors. Usually this subclassification is important to predict the prognosis. These are luminal A type of tumors with the ER positive, HER2 negative and PR positive conditions have a favorable prognosis. Prognosis is usually good. Usually these are treated either with the surgery and chemotherapy, simple chemotherapy, one course of chemotherapy, no need of follow-up treatment. Then luminal B is another variety. That's where it will be ER positive, HER2 negative or positive, and it presents in the PR positive, ER positive and PR positive, and high Ki67, high proliferation level. The prognosis is worse than luminal. Then those who have HER2 amplified, very high HER2 positive and overexpressed HER2, ER negative, these tumors may grow faster than other cancers and have a poor prognosis. So once this ER/PR classification is done, prognosis can be predicted and there will be a certain difference in the approach to the treatment based upon the prognosis. Now how that the differences in the treatment comes in, I will just make a brief asset. Now because the issue has become quite complex now to make the diagnosis of breast cancer, the current oncological discipline will have multiple types of guidelines of different categories, starting from the stage of screening to the stage of the follow-up care of breast cancer. There are guidelines and the guidelines are being published almost very regularly at a frequency of 1 to 2 years, and if at all you are a practicing ophthalmologist, it's necessary that you have to follow these guidelines. From the other point of view, also from the clinical point of view, also we should have a clear idea like the changing pattern of the guidelines. What are the changing guidelines which are necessary, because you have to keep up to date. So if at all you have to keep yourself up to date, the regular issue guidelines have to be followed and read about. Now the guidelines could be about screening, about pharmacological intervention of breast cancer, risk reduction, or sentinel lymph node biopsy or axillary node dissection, estrogen receptor and progesterone receptor testing. For testing also there are daily when you have to go for test and so on, and early breast cancer diagnosis, treatment and follow-up, lumpectomy, margins, mastectomy, post-mastectomy, treatment of HER2 positive breast cancer, selection of optimal adjuvant therapy. The guidelines are changing every year. There are some new guidelines coming up. Neoadjuvant therapy, endocrine therapy and targeted therapy, hormonal adjuvant therapy, use of biomarkers to guide systemic adjuvant therapy, breast cancer in younger women, follow-up care of breast cancer survivors. These are certain areas where the guidelines are released every time. Now to go into every guideline from our class, this discussion point of view would be impossible. So I will be referring to a few of the guidelines which I feel somewhat necessary from our routine clinical point of view, like a patient presenting with a lump in the breast, and how to whether lumpectomy has to be done or a mastectomy has to be done from a practicing surgical point of view. guidelines, current guidelines is lumpectomy for invasive cancer with or without the local in situ conditions, ductal carcinoma in situ. The negative margin should be essential. So if at all you have to do the lumpectomy, the margins should be negative. That's a negative margin in the sense the tumor has to be excised along with some amount of the normal tissue is required. Suppose your first lumpectomy doesn't have a negative margin, and if it's proved to be in situ carcinoma or even for the invasive cancer, re-excision is not recommended if the patient is undergoing radiation therapy. Radiation is done. So re-excision has to be, if at all we go for the re-excision, it has to be, reason has to be documented without a specific reason. The specific reason could be like a proof of the tumor tissue remaining over, because radiation therapy now has become more efficient. Then lumpectomy for in situ cancer without micro-invasive component and negative margin, no tumor or in all margins of more than 2 millimeters, no other surgery is necessary if the patient is undergoing standard radiation therapy and other recommended radiation therapies as indicated. If at all re-excision has to be, it has to be documented. So that's all, the reason has to be documented. Now this is a very important issue. Whenever a patient comes with a history of lumpectomy and then the follow-up, you feel that there is a tumor left over, whether it has to be excised or not. The guideline, you need to follow the guideline, and the guideline, otherwise there can be certain litigations and the legal issues also. So from that point of view, the guidelines are important. And I have just put this guidelines as it, copy as it, directly from the source to the source is already referred to, official statement. And lumpectomy for invasive cancer without this in situ cancers, ductal cancer in situ, re-excision is not recommended. And lumpectomy for in situ cancer without micro-invasive component, re-excision is recommended with margin less than 2 millimeter. Documentation with re-excision is not performed. So re-excision, whether it's required or not, this is specified. Lumpectomy for invasive or in situ cancer with positive margin, perform re-excision surgery or documentation why it is not performed. Positive margins are associated with at least a twofold increase in the same breast recurrence in the same breast. Negative margins up to means the breast recurrence of the breast tumor or ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence. That's recurrence in the same breast area, and this is not lowered by wider margin breast. Earlier there was a belief that if you have a wider margin, excise more tissue beyond the tumor, chances of recurrence are lesser. But now, based on the statistical evidences, it is said that the margins, even a few positive margin, may not have the chance of recurrence if the patient is followed with the radiation therapy or chemotherapy. And the ipsilateral tumor recurrence is reduced with the use of systemic therapy in patients who do not receive adjuvant systemic therapy. So systemic tumor drugs has to be used. Then biologic subtypes do not indicate need for margins wider than no ink on tumor. That's biological subtypes like PR positive or negative, they do not indicate the need for margin width, whether the margin width should be lesser or not. See, earlier, in the early days, like when we were studying surgery, that margin width in the case of tumor, oncological tumor excision, how far the margin has to be left over was one of the important issues. Wider the margin, it was considered to be safe, so we will have to remove more tissue than it is required. But now the trend is to save the tissue, so that wider margin issue has now become obsolete because the patient is followed with the chemotherapy and the systemic chemotherapy and so on. So wider negative margins than no ink on tumor are not indicated for patients with the invasive lobular cancer. There is no need for the invasive cancer to have a wider excision as well. When it is associated with increased risk of ipsilateral breast tumor after breast conserving therapy and increased risk for usually yield for surgical excision somewhat easily, even mastectomy. Whereas younger patients, there is an emotional issue where they prefer a breast conserving surgery. And now it is known that young age is having a high risk of developing these recurrence locally as well as over the posterior surface, over the chest wall, after intervention. And hence the margin width should be more in younger patients. Extensive intrarectal component, that's if there is an intrarectal component in the patient's tumor pathology, then the margins are negative, there is no evidence of recurrence as such. So that's about the lumpectomy. Then about the mastectomy guideline, current indication for mastectomy, complete removal of the breast cancer, and now this again is in 2022 guideline. Any cancer unsuitable product, this follow therapy with the simple medical treatment based upon large tumor or breast size ratio, multicentric tumors, insufficient response to neoadjuvant therapy, persistently positive margins of excision, inflammatory breast cancer, extensive inflammatory breast cancer is mastitis carcinomatosa, extensive malignant nuclear calcification in early pregnancy, proven or suspected genetic susceptibility, local recurrence following this lumpectomy and radiation therapy, and chemotherapy and radiation therapy, contraindication for the radiation therapy. These are the specific indications for mastectomy. So the trend is changing from mastectomy to lumpectomy. Earlier, a few years back, maybe 20 years back, every case of proved cancer was treated with mastectomy, and lumpectomy was considered as a high risk condition. But the trend is changing, guidelines are changing, and being aware of these guidelines is quite important if we are handling surgical. So surgical handling of the cases of the breast cancer, these guidelines are important, otherwise there can be a litigation or the issues of maybe significant as. Then prophylaxis, high risk but unaffected patients, whether there is a treatment need or not, mastectomy is needed or not. This is again the guideline will be if there is a proved genetic susceptibility, and if the patient had a previous history of radiation therapy, or if the patient prefers, then the mastectomy could be done. Another of the guideline which is some significance is post mastectomy radiation therapy. We developed recent clinical guideline would be again based upon American Society of Clinical Oncology recommends the following criteria for performing post-mastectomy radiation therapy. Now, this again is a controversial issue. Most of the patients are who capture surgery, now oncologists would recommend radiation therapy. And many times it happens like the patients come to us asking for like whether the radiation therapy is necessary or not. Now, to give you a definite opinion, you need to be aware of these guidelines. I am just suggesting or picking up these points because these are the issues which we face regularly in the clinical practice. Patients may have undergone surgery somewhere, and before the radiation therapy or chemotherapy is started, they want to take an opinion from us, maybe from hygiene point of view, whether it can be valid or not. So from that point of view, whenever we give an opinion, we need to have some idea about the current guidelines. And the guideline would be radiation therapy is essential if there is a positive margin, or if the primary tumor is more than 5 centimeter, and if there is involvement of more than 4 lymph nodes, radiation therapy is a must, is necessary, otherwise it can be managed. Now chemotherapy regimen, again from our clinical point of view, I am not going to this, we will not use that, but you have to have a fair idea like what are the types of chemotherapy used. Now selection of this chemotherapy regimen would be based upon the type of the tumor, and I am not going to that detail like which type of the tumor, which condition requires chemotherapy, which type of chemotherapy. This again are part of the guideline of that your suggestion, pharmacotherapy of the malignancy. I am just briefing about just the regimen which are often used. The regimen used are commonly are cyclophosphamide, methotrexate, and high fluoride Now, when I say this, treating with the breast cancer patients, we need to be aware of the current issues as well as some justification from the point of view. The most important part in a patient presenting with a lump in the breast would be to make a perfect diagnosis, correct diagnosis. So, all that investigational facilities, including this mammography, USG, macro, or any of those would be essential because of the basic principle of clinical practice like beneficence, non-beneficence, autonomy and justice, veracity and fidelity. These are considered to be the basic 5 lines of the medical profession. I will be giving more stress on the diagnosis, so, and I will be using all those possible techniques, and then if necessary we will go for the biopsy. Now once the biopsy is done, the current guidelines, they are essential. What happens is because the guidelines are changing and the mastectomy from the surgical point of view, because the mastectomy guidelines are changing, these days since around maybe 2016 I have not done a mastectomy because the issues are maybe somewhat complex. Issues have become more complex issues now, and with our limited facilities we may not be able to follow the guidelines. I am just sharing my clinical experience which I have done prior to 2016. Earlier, in those days, these guidelines which are not practiced, and surgery, the mastectomy surgery is done from 1998 onwards. See, 1985 to 1988, I couldn't maintain a proper record of these issues. So from 1998 to 2016, that period, I have operated around 37 cases, and the results of this, and these are some of these patients, they preferred Ayurvedic treatment, and I have treated in only Kanchana Raghu, Aragya and Kumari Asana, and the results are the patients, 7 patients could not be followed for more than a year also. Some of the patients prefer contemporary treatment after surgery. Once it is confirmed that it is a malignancy, they prefer contemporary treatment. So it's always giving the choice to the patients. Now other patients I have treated with the Kanchana Aragya. Now among these patients, recurrence has occurred in 1 year in around 10 patients. Recurrence in between 1 to 5 years in 9 patients, and recurrence after 5 years in 2 of the patients. Non-recurrence will follow for more than 7 years. So 7 patients. Now this is very interesting issue. So Kanchana Aragya Kumarias, which is now generally described as, would have some advantage in preventing the recurrence. I will say that it's an alternative chemotherapy, alternative to chemotherapy. Earlier I have tried with Banganaka and Prasananiki also, but the results are not convincing. The issue is there will be major complications in the lab. Then the other area is the palliative care. Patients who have already extensive malignancy and the contemporary treatment has failed to produce a response. Such is the area where the patients will be usually preferring Ayurvedic treatment, and that's the area of the step. And I would say with our treatment, we can improve the general condition of the patient. That's what I usually say. You can add life to the years, though not years to the life. The duration of the life may not be extended. And there again, the preference of the treatment would be not because it's a tumor pathology, there is no specific treatment for the tumor. It's around considering the dosha condition and a palliative care. And the palliative care which I prefer would be general, very simple, would be patients who have extensive pain from treatment and when space given, and patients of dyspepsia, which are the common issues in the advanced cancer condition. Aragya and Kumari Asana, cachectic patients, Ashokamarishta, the patient tumor necrosis pyrexia, patients with the advanced cancer, they tend to have tumor necrosis induced pyrexia. In that condition, I will be preferring Murti and Amkarishta. So that's about the clinical issue. Now, as whether Ayurvedic treatment can really prevent cancer or not. Now again, I am just giving you my clinical experience, the chances, opportunities to have that kind of a study of prevention, you may not get frequently. Now, in my clinical experience, I have two healthy siblings with family history of breast cancer reported in 2018 with CA-128 levels of 788 units. Now these two sisters, their elder sister had a cancer of breast, and hence they have gone for the genetic study, and they are BRCA positive. They have the BRCA positive, and their 125 CA-128 levels are 70 and 82 units, somewhat above normal. Whether such patients have to be considered as a pre-malignancy, whether the risk of malignancy is higher or not. Theoretically, they have a high chance of developing malignancy, and there is no definite prophylactic treatment there. Now, even in such patients, in that patient, in those patients, I have suggested Vilechana with Panchamukhya Prasthana once in a year. And diet and lifestyle recommendations and pranayama practice also have been given, and I have not given any regular medicines. And till today, there is no lesion detected. And these patients have undergone tested CA-125 almost every year on their own. They could afford that. And the levels are gradually reducing in subject 1. These are the readings 2018 to 2022. 2023 they have not tested. I have not got the feedback of the results. So there is some scope. Again, it's too early to say that whether the Vilechana has prevented or not. But for about 5 years, the patients have not developed malignancy. So that's one of the leading issues. Again, I am not saying that Vilechana would prevent and so on, but definitely yes, lifestyle measures and pranayama practices can help. With this, we will conclude about this breast cancer today, and we will continue with the other types of cancer in the coming sessions. If there are any questions, I will try to answer, and then